This meeting to order. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Marquette Township Board. Tonight is Tuesday, July 18th. It's 6:30 p.m. And if you would join us in the pledge, we'd appreciate it. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Randy, roll call, please.
Trustee LaRue,
Here.
Trustee Wiegand,
Here.
Trustee Everson,
Here.
Trustee Marks,
Present.
Treasurer Johnson,
Here.
Clerk Retired is here, and Supervisor Durant.
Here.
Staff present is Manager Gerard, our Township Attorney Roger Zappa. Committee members present are Mike Springer from Planning, Recreation, and Roads, and the Fire Chief Ron DeMars is here also.
Thank you.
Jason.
And and Planner McCarthy is here also.
Okay, thanks for joining us, everybody. We're not usually this dressed up, but we did have our board photo tonight in the rain, so that should look rather interesting. So the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which tonight includes approval of the regular minutes of July 5th, received in committee and other reports, the assessor's report from July, which is a new addition, Recreation Committee agenda for July 18th, Road Committee minutes for June 6th, Fire Chief and Marshal report for June, Sheriff's Department of June, Election Committee draft minutes of July 5th, Water Production report for June, Marquette Area Wastewater Treatment Facility Advisory Board meeting minutes of May 18th, and my report. Also, the bills payable in the amount of $195,659.32, and preliminary financial statements from June.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and support. Did you raise your hand, Randy?
I did not.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Then I need approval for the rest of the agenda if there are no changes to make.
I move to accept the agenda as presented.
Support.
Motion and lots of support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comment. Anybody wishing to address the board, please come forward to any of the microphones, either one, and give us a name and address, please. We ask that you keep it to 3 minutes if possible.
Hi, I'm Carol Getz, and I live at 123 Pineview Drive in Bishop Woods. And my reason for being here this evening is that a building permit was issued across the street from me for a duplex living in a single-family residential area. And I want to know who's responsible for having done this. And, it's not fair. And also, when I worked with the office up here, it was awful. It was an awful experience, and I was blowing off, and I wasn't given any straight answers. And for me to get any answers, I had to go downtown to the courthouse to get answers on what was going on. So, thank you, and I want you to look into this, okay, because it's really not right. A lot of people have spent a lot of money on their homes, and and a lot of money on the property and taxes and everything, and you're going to take a single-family place and turn it into a rental area. And so that's all I have to say, unless you have any questions, please. Okay.
Thanks, Carol. I probably should have prefaced it even by reading, and maybe I will, just so everybody knows. Our policy for board or for public comment. This board is conducting a meeting today to take care of township business. You are allowed to address the board at least twice tonight, now and then after the business is done. But we will not have back and forth conversation between the staff, the board, and the public during public comment. For public comment, or if you would like to speak on a particular agenda item, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to address the board. The board may, but it is not required, respond to you at board member comment, which is immediately following public comment. The board may also request follow-up with the township manager on some matters addressed during public comment. Just so everybody knows, that is on our agenda too, it's printed there. But anybody's welcome to get up and speak.
Hello, my name is Ron Ingram. I live at 2525 Center Street, and I recently received a letter in the mail saying that I need to remove my chickens off the property. Did not know this was an issue in the first place, since I've seen chickens on other properties in Trowbridge. I would just like the board to reconsider or revisit the issue of allowing chickens to be part of someone's property in the township, please.
Thank you, Ron. Anybody else, feel free to step up.
Hello, I'm Shelley Hicks and I live at 935 Bishop Woods Road, and I'm here to address the same issue that Carol just spoke about. We learned on last Friday that there was a permit issued for a home in our neighborhood. I understand that the permit is issued as a mother-in-law suite, but it really doesn't fit what a true mother-in-law suite would be. I have no problem with mother-in-law suites or, you know, families living together in the same home as long as there's one entrance, etc., and that the space, you know, is shared. This clearly looks like a duplex. It has two separate entrances. It has it actually has an additional door on the front of it too. It has two separate garages, and the space, the new addition space, is actually only conjoined to the existing house with one hallway, one small hallway that I'm afraid when this current owner turns around to sell could be used as a duplex in the future. And Bishop Woods is supposed to be a single-family residential area, and I'm really disappointed that this got through without any neighbors being contacted and maybe a variance put out or looked at, and that you know, as Carol said, she was questioning. She had found out about this a couple, like 2.5 weeks ago, and has been dealing with the township offices, and they've used the word confidential a lot, and she asked to attend a meeting that was going on regarding it, and she was denied. I spoke with the township person yesterday after I heard about this over the weekend, and he's the one that told me it was approved on Friday. He also used the word confidential, but he also said that what the township maybe needs to revisit is their definitions of what a duplex is and what a, you know, their different terms for mother-in-law, et cetera. He thinks that they are possibly outdated, and that could be, you know, one of the reasons that this was approved. So I'm asking, I guess, for one, that you revisit the permit because I don't feel that it fits a single-family residence, and that's what our neighborhood is. Two, I think we should possibly look at revisiting, you know, some of these definitions, like the gentleman in the township suggested. And also, I think, you know, this whole new thing of the Airbnbs is becoming a problem all over the nation, and there's many articles and many boards like yourselves that are addressing it and trying to come up with a plan. And I ask that if you know, aren't currently working on it, that you please do, because things like this are going to affect not only our neighborhood, but the, you know, entire township. I'm really afraid that even though this current homeowner does not plan, says he's using this for his in-laws to live in, I'm really afraid that the next owner can easily see that one doorway can be added to it and it can be two separate living spaces. The homeowner shared the plans yesterday, and I printed them off for everyone. Can I give them to you so you can at least see?
That's fine.
Thank you.
thing that was brought up is that somebody brought up the fact that there is a township ordinance that says that there only can be 3-car garages facing the road. This clearly has 4 cars facing the road.
Thank you.
And 3 entrance doors facing the road. So maybe it is that, the design needs to be revisited a little bit to not appear as a duplex, and be more in line with a mother-in-law suite. I know we have a lot of support here tonight. I know there's people, for the gentleman that's doing the addition also. But I also know that we've talked to many more people in the neighborhood too that support that this looks like a duplex, and we're very much against that weren't even able to make it tonight because this is such a last-minute thing. Carol had said, it was very hard to get the information, and she and I went to the county courthouse yesterday just in finding about this, and we're able to look at the plans, but we're not able to take pictures or anything. So I just ask that you relook at it and revisit it, and thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Or Shelley, pardon me.
My name is Mona Lang, and I live at 175 Pineview Drive in Bishop Woods. And I did come yesterday, and I met with your zoning official, and he assured me that the township did their due diligence on this, and that it is in compliance with zoning as it now stands. However, I wasn't going to speak tonight until I heard the word confidence, confidential. This is a public board. This is a public process. The county information is public process. If you don't tell someone, I have been in government for 40 years, and you don't tell someone it's confidential. You tell them that there are methods to obtain that information, and that is through a FOIA. There is a Freedom of Information Act law. In Michigan, there's a Sunshine Law, Open Meetings Act law, and so I'm concerned when I'm being told it's confidential. Is something going on behind the scenes where potential zoning is not being necessarily addressed the way it should be? The process is not being addressed the way it should be. So I would just like assurance that indeed the procedures are being followed properly, and that the public does have information that they need when they need it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mona. Anybody else wish to speak? Welcome to. Sure.
My name is Dennis Anderson. I'm the one that they're talking about, a mother-in-law suite. Which people don't understand what a mother-in-law suite clearly is. You could have as many entrances or entries as you want in a mother-in-law suite. To make your job a little bit easier and understand what the difference
Mr.
is about.
Anderson, you're addressing the board,
Okay,
please.
I'm addressing the board.
Thank
All
you.
you have to do is go on house.com and plug in mother-in-law suite, and you come up with about 400,000 or 500,000 examples of a mother-in-law suite. They could do that and look it up and see exactly what it is, above garage, under a garage, behind the house, a separate facility, whatever they want. Somebody here is passing on a lot of fake information, fake news, duplex, rental units. None of this is being rented. My mother-in-law happens to live in Phoenix. She comes here. She's got a condo she's going to be selling. She's only here a few weeks a year. We also have a house in Indian River. They travel back and forth. They need a comfortable place to stay when they're here. I don't see what the big deal is. I don't complain about people here putting 4 or 5 garages in their yards. I don't know what they're going to use for when they sell garage repair. I don't know. But it's a lot of information here that's being passed on. It's not true. Prints are here. I passed them out. There was nothing hidden anywhere. Everybody in this room could have come knocked on my door and got these. As soon as I heard about this yesterday, I had an email to everybody. Nothing was hidden here from anybody. So I don't know what this big uproar is about a mother-in-law suite. I don't believe in nursing homes. These people do. That's fine. Put their parents in there if they choose to. I do not. I'm done.
Thank you.
So, my name's Lou Nardi. I live at 745 Bishop Woods Road. Just listening to it, I just heard about a little bit about it yesterday. I don't know a whole lot about it. Some information was passed on. I seen the floor plan layout. I don't live on that side of the street. I signed the covenants when I built my house. It is what it is. I feel I could go to Dennis and ask him for it. I guess the biggest thing is there's a lot of us that are in compliance and out of compliance. So what is I think the whole thing starts where we didn't get any information from Marquette Township, and that's where some people got frustrated. That's kind of what I hear here. Some people tried to get some information to see what was going on. They were kind of denied that information. Why that is, I don't know. It should be open to anybody that wants to see that information. And I think it was carried from there because some people had to go to the courthouse to get some information. So it went from this level to where we are today. So I feel possibly it could be in the township's hands where it went from here to here, and a lot of people just don't understand. So that's my feeling at this point.
Thank you. Is everybody, we can get some answers if everybody's finished speaking, but you're welcome to come up. Okay, Jace, please.
Jason McCarthy, 325 Northwoods Road. I'm also the Planning and Zoning Administrator for Marquette Township. First of all, I want to apologize for not necessarily lack of experience, but a lack of protocol. I have never had the situation come up where an active building permit on a residential addition is then asked to be viewed by an adjacent property owner. I didn't know the protocol for that. I didn't mean to use the word confidential per se, but I didn't, I felt like, well, we're still in the process of reviewing this, and when I spoke to Ms. Getz, I told her that when I found out the answer, I would provide her that information. Unfortunately, I was out of the office sick yesterday. I provided her with the attorney's information. I really relish this opportunity because I do think that zoning is kind of aloof to a lot of people, but what I will say is that we went one step ahead beyond what we normally would to address a simple building permit application. In my eyes, this was an addition because it met the definition of a single-family dwelling unit addition by our zoning ordinance. And perhaps Isaac's suggestion is correct, that we should revisit some definitions in our ordinance to address this. But in my view, and confirmed by the township attorney, this met the requirements for the zoning ordinance, and thus we issued the building permit on Friday. It was also suggested that there's a bunch of nepotism going on, and that's not true. I pride myself on customer service and treating everybody the same. I'm in my 7th year here, and I believe that we've done a fair job of treating everybody equally, regardless of who is related to who at one time in their life. I currently live on Northwoods Road, and I have a Subaru dealership that we're going to be reviewing a site plan in front of my house. I'm not exactly tickled about it, but if it meets the zoning ordinance requirements, we shall approve it, and that's the way we operate. We don't support subdivision covenants. We don't enforce subdivision covenants. That's pretty well known throughout the zoning world. We enforce zoning. So when that building permit application came through, we actually took extra time and did due diligence on it, as confirmed by the township attorney in his opinion, and we issued that building permit. So I just wanted to apologize, I guess, to Carol for not providing the information, not knowing whether it was, I guess, respectful to the applicant of that application to provide that information. But I do learn every day in this job, and I won't make the mistake again. Okay. So I just wanted to address the board because I had a chance to speak to a few of you before the meeting tonight to relay some information to you. But we feel confident that we made the correct decision based on our zoning, and I guess unless there's any questions, I don't really have anything else to add.
Jason, thanks. The board did not know anything about this, just so you know. This is not an agenda item. Would you mind explaining the process for the public as to how this unfolds? The board is not involved in...
Yeah, the townships are a little bit different than
stuff.
cities. We don't control our own roads, and we don't issue building permits. The county does issue those building permits. However, in order for a building permit to be approved, whether it's for a Meyer, or whether it's for, you know, a 20 by 46 garage, we sign off on zoning. So we make sure that that development meets the height and bulk requirements of the zoning district. In this case, Mr. Anderson's development or addition met side yard setback, it met the open space requirements, height, so that the fire department can service it should it need to. It met all those requirements. We did take a good look at the definitions for duplex in multifamily, and we don't believe that it met those definitions at all. It is accessible, it is not, you know, it has other amenities on another side of the house, but it is not separated by an unbroken wall. There is, and that's really what it boils down to. So whether Mr. Anderson's a smart gentleman in his planning, or whether he vetted our zoning ordinance to see what he could construct, he did that. And if it meets the zoning ordinance, you shall approve it. And that's the way it shaped out. If he's willing to make any concessions or to change any plans to appease any of the people of Bishop Woods who have complained about the appearance of that structure, that's solely up to him. But as far as we're concerned, he met the requirements, and that's why we signed off on zoning.
And can you go a little farther as to how this board plays a part in that?
Well, I believe that the reason that the folks that are here that are upset with you tonight are probably upset with, one, me, okay, and two, at the zoning ordinance for it not, I guess, holding up to what their opinion of appropriate height and bulk for single-family dwellings. There are a lot of big homes in both Bishop Woods, Huron Woods, and I'm not going to call any of them out. We appreciate all of these property owners. This is, you know, a huge tax component of the community. I didn't think it would escalate to the point that it did, and I'm a little surprised by that. But I appreciate the opportunity to meet new residents, to hear their complaints and concerns, because we can make the ordinance better, and then, you know, we can make hopefully the approval process better for those who are applying for permits. But as far as a variance, variances are usually used in the context of, you know, I want to put my garage in the backyard, but I got a rock outcrop. Can I not meet that side yard setback? Well, then you would go to the ZBA to have a variance to move that because of an act of God, not because of a self-created situation.
So what can the subdivision do? Any of the residents there, can they all come in and talk to you? Will that change anything? Can they
Well,
file something, or?
Unfortunately, I don't believe there's an active homeowners association, and oftentimes covenants are much more restrictive than the township ordinance or any ordinance would be. But I don't believe that there's an active homeowners association that they can go to say, we feel that this is a violation of the covenants, and pursue legal action that way. I'm not sure. I'm not here to provide legal advice to the residents of Bishop Woods that are upset about this. But I don't know what the right answer is. The right answer, I guess, would be to revisit those definitions, I guess, to see if, you know, to the woman's comment about VRBO and Airbnb, the Planning Commission currently is taking up those. We always try to stay ahead of the curve with regards to, I was just on VRBO today, and there was one in the township that I know of, and I did send a letter stating that that was not conducive with township zoning. Short-term rentals, those kind of things change the character of a neighborhood when you have transient families coming in and out every day. So I actually appreciate the opportunity to speak to so many people at once about things that we do every day. These are things we talk about. The chickens, you know, that's a great idea. I'm a supporter of, you know, local food. I'm also a supporter of minimal zoning requirements, but I have to enforce the document that was here when I started working here. Now that document is a living, breathing thing, and it can be amended over time as things change, as society changes. But right now, you know, we're enforcing what we have on the books, which we think performs pretty well, other than this particular instance where you have some residents that are aggrieved by, I want to say an aesthetic, not so much a use. Now, keep in mind, Mr. Anderson only has one electric service, and he has one utility service. If at any point in the future that becomes a duplex or anything other than a single-family dwelling unit, that violates the zoning ordinance. And I'm sure that the residents would make us well aware of that, one, And two, that would be in direct violation of the ordinance in which we would take enforcement action on. Regardless of who you are or who you know, the best way to perform zoning, in my 10 years of experience, is to treat everybody equally. And I apologize to Carol for feeling that she was treated differently. I'm a very matter-of-fact kind of guy, and I try not to talk in circles. I apologize to you if you felt that you were slighted by me, okay?
Well, when somebody comes to you with a site plan or an idea or asking for a permit, you don't necessarily just rush out and tell everybody what's happening. They're entitled to a modicum of confidentiality until that process is actually vetted.
That's true, but I guess at the time that we were applying for zoning, and I'd have to confirm this with our township council, but I guess at the time when it's submitted to the community for review, it must be at that time that it becomes public, and I will follow that from now on. But you're right, there's other things happening in the community that private property owners don't want you to know about until it's time to act. A lot of times approvals are contingent upon zoning approval. The sale of a property is contingent upon everything lining up zoning-wise, and there's so much that goes into all these developments, whether it's a residential home addition or if it's a 200,000 square foot Meijer store. There's a lot of moving parts in all these developments. So we're just a small component of that overall process.
Well, and there's two ways that planning can be affected, which involves the ordinances and the zoning. The township board can take a stance on something, an issue, and put it to planning and say, we'd like you to work on this, research it, develop an ordinance, figure out how it affects zoning or vice versa. Planning can come to us and say, well, we've had a request for this, we might have to have legal look at how we might redo the ordinance or something like that. So the board is kind of sometimes the final say, but this is operations. We don't really get involved with how the operations go, day to day. And I'm not trying to put anybody off by any means. You're always welcome to come and talk to us individually or as a group and see where we can direct you. But our job is to kind of supervise the township and its operations. They're the ones, staff are the ones that take care of all of this stuff. If they're acting inappropriately, then obviously we'd have to know about it. Because Randy is our employee as township manager, he's responsible for all the rest of the employees and how those operations run. So that can be really confusing in government, and that might be why sometimes people think, oh, well, government's not doing anything. I called my representative and I can't do anything, or I called my township trustee and he can't come out and help me. Sometimes we can't. That's not our job. We have to work as a body. We have to work as seven. Other than the three of us who have some responsibilities statutorily, we can't speak individually. We can't tell Randy that Jason needs to do this or that. And I just wanted to explain that because it is a little different structure than what you might be used to. But Jason or the manager are always willing to answer questions or help anytime. You can always call them. And if something is going awry, let one of us know. Yes, Roger.
I'd like to interject just a couple of points or comments and observations on the issue. First, the zoning administrator can really only address what plan or proposal is being presented to him or her at any given point in time. A point that he made that is very critical in this issue is you have to look at the definitions and the plans and determine, is this, for example, the term duplex was used at one point. And the duplex has very specific definitions, and this is not a duplex. Now, could this be modified to turn it into a duplex by a subsequent owner? Yes, it could be. That is not an inconceivable thing. However, when that happens, that structure then does become violative of the township zoning ordinance, and an action would be appropriate at that point. But to determine that, well, it might turn into this in the future, obviously that's a concern of all residents of what could happen, but it really boils down to speculation at that point, and that's the zoning administrator would be going above and beyond what he's authorized to commit to by speculating on what the future might hold. He's been presented with a plan, and that particular plan, he's determined essentially is not a duplex and is not a multifamily dwelling unit. It does not, actually, the terminology of the zoning ordinance does not contain more than one dwelling unit, based again on definitions, and that's whether the planning commission or the township wishes to revise the zoning ordinance or reconsider that, because it is an evolutionary type of document. If you don't modify it from time to time, well, it can become stagnant. So is that fair game to look at? Perhaps so, but at this point you have what it is, and that's what it is. Another fairly important point I just wanted to make is that many subdivisions do have covenants. Covenants are something very different from a zoning ordinance. A covenant is, to some extent, a contract between your developer or the person who sold you the property and the property owners. And each one operates a little bit differently, and those are sometimes stricter. Sometimes they violate law. I can tell you of one subdivision in the city of Marquette that I'm aware of that I believe has never been amended, that disallows the sale of property to certain races, which is obviously unenforceable and illegal, but it is an old subdivision, and it's in there if you want to go back and look at those covenants. The covenants, however, are not and cannot be enforced by the township. The township has its own legislative powers, which includes adoption of ordinances. And whether we like the ordinance or the ordinance needs to be revised is a different discussion for a different day, perhaps. But the covenants are generally enforced by a homeowners association. If there is no, and I don't know if there's a homeowners association or not, I'm hearing things for the first time here, but that's something that can be formed. But regardless of the answer to that question of whether there is or is not a homeowners association, those criteria in the covenants cannot be enforced by a governmental unit such as Marquette Township. They can be enforced contractually by the homeowners association if there is one, but the two, even though there's a big overlap sometimes between what's in a zoning ordinance and what are in the covenants, they may be the same, they might be different, or they might have some similarities. The township has no authority to enforce them, regardless of whether there is or is not a homeowners association. So I just wanted to dispel any confusion that there might be on that point. And that's not to minimize the importance of those covenants, because perhaps many purchasers relied on them upon purchasing the properties, but that's not something that Marquette Township has any legal authority, and if we tried to enforce covenants, a court would quickly tell us we couldn't do that. I just wanted to clarify, because in case they weren't entirely crystal clear.
And they're not. This is all very confusing for a lot of people, and they don't do it every day.
So just in review, I want Mrs. Getz to know, and the other residents of Bishop Woods, that we didn't just look at this and say, yeah, it's good to go, let's do it. We actually went one step beyond it and asked for the attorney's opinion on it too, and he looked through some additional, we contacted the Marquette County Building Codes, got their opinion, and it matched ours. So we actually took more time and more due diligence on this than we normally would with what we would consider to be a fairly simple home addition. So again, I apologize for any withholding of information. That wasn't my intent. We had an active permit and we hadn't come to a decision yet. But I appreciate everybody being here and being concerned about that, being engaged with the process. There's plenty of spots on committees for folks if you have extra time, which is now a commodity, I understand. But yeah, I have an open door policy. We strive to have good customer service here. This is my first, I guess, wrinkle in my shirt as far as that goes, and I will work harder to make that process better.
Thanks, Jason. Any questions for Jason? Pete?
I have a question. How do they what should they do about a covenant? If it's, in the covenant says you can't do it, so to speak, and if it's been not very active, what recourse do they have? Maybe you or Roger would answer that.
That's a great question, and I would defer to Roger, but I'm not even sure he would have the appropriate answer. I mean, if it's been disbanded for so long, I'm not sure the legal requirement or process to reform it in a timely manner enough to challenge a building permit application that's been approved.
That would be governed by the covenants themselves. And again, the township, I certainly can't provide legal advice to a homeowners association that may or may not exist. However, that's going to be specified in the covenants themselves as far as how what the committee or association consists of, how the members are selected and so forth.
My understanding is it's not enforced. Randy?
Just that by example, when we purchased the property to build this facility, covenants existed and we had to build within those covenants, and we are restricted by those covenants in terms of what we can do on this property and what we can add to it and what we can't add to it. So, we are operating under covenants in this particular property area that we're in. The only other comment that I'll make is that the only confidential discussion that I know of that occurred in this process was a confidential meeting between the planner, zoning administrator, and civil counsel, Zappa, which is always confidential. It's attorney-client privilege.
Yes, Mrs. Getz did say that she was not locked out of a meeting, but was not allowed into a meeting. It wasn't a public meeting, it was a meeting between myself and our legal counsel, so I just wanted to clear that up too.
Okay. Hope that helps a little bit. About all we can do on that now. And thank you for coming.
But I
You're
certainly
welcome.
would encourage people to be involved with the Planning Commission because they are actively now considering the Airbnbs, the VRBOs, and tiny homes. That is on their horizon, on their agenda that they're looking at, because those are things that we will be facing.
Second and fourth Wednesdays of the month at 7 o'clock right here.
That's correct. And while I have you here, we're constantly looking at things that that are enemies of rural residential living. We are not the city, we are the township. We want to preserve that for you. I live in the township. I want to have those same amenities that you moved into the township to enjoy. So we are addressing VRBO, short-term rentals, that's what they're called. Whether they're Airbnb, VRBO, whatever, what have you. We are addressing those, and we will make those, I suspect by the end of the summer, there will be a special use requirement. You'll have to have a Marquette Township business license. You'll have to have an annual inspection, hopefully by their fire department and their expertise, to make sure that those homes are safe for people to utilize that. But we're hoping, and we don't think that's a rampant problem in the township, but we know it is a growing trend, and we want to protect your community, our community, against those types of land uses. Not to say that they're not constitutionally available to people, but that there will be a strict process where everybody within 300 feet of that property would be notified. They would have a chance to come and speak at a duly called public hearing, and the Planning Commission at that point could either issue a permit, deny the permit, or approve the permit with certain conditions and safeguards that may help harmoniously locate that land use in a neighborhood.
I got one more question for Jason. Jason, in this particular situation, were we required to send a notice to the neighbors within 300 feet?
Negative.
Okay. We're good?
That would have applied had a zoning board of appeals hearing be necessary. If there was a variance that would be necessary, then you would have received notice.
Okay.
Okay. Next up on the agenda is privilege comment. We have Democratic candidate Sarah Cambenzi here that would like to visit with us for a second.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you, first of all, for allowing me to speak separate from the citizens' comments. I will keep my talk brief, but I would like to tell you a little bit more about myself. Many of you know me right now as a city commissioner. I'm currently serving my second term in the city of Marquette. Before that, I was elected the city charter commissioner, where we actually looked at the rules and regulations we're allowed to operate under by the state constitution. And previous to that, I was a 2-year appointed member of our Marquette City Planning Commission, dealing with many of the issues that were talked about during public comment. I was born and raised here. I come from a mother who was a union nurse. She worked at MGH, and I believe that much of what she has given me is the heart, and that's the heart to want to step up and represent the people and serve the people as well, and put their issues before my own. I also come from a father who is a land surveyor and an engineer, and I feel like what he's given me most is common sense. And I can't tell you how important that's been serving as a city commissioner when we're dealing with complex issues such as the hospital agreement, which I've taken a very hard stance on. And one of the reasons I believe I am qualified to step up and to serve in the 109th District position is because I understand what it takes in terms of research. I understand what it takes in terms of understanding putting risk onto the taxpayers, and I understand the implications of long-term agreements when they're not fully in the best interest of the citizens. It's been a tough vote to take so many no votes on this hospital project, but the things that I didn't think were fair were simply selling the parcel of property with the building and land for $4 million when the taxpayers bonded and paid over $20 million for that. Allowing the hospital to charge us rent on our salt barn for the next year while we kept that on their property after it was sold. Not having anything in the agreement that ties them to do anything with the old hospital or the existing hospital. Nothing has to be done with it in terms of reuse or taking it down. Lastly, the city of Marquette has spent $30 million in bonds, and it's been sold as it's reimbursable through the state of Michigan brownfield agreement, but it's not free. And the city of Marquette has had to bond for every penny of that. We will have to pay interest on it. And the only guarantee that we signed in the agreement with the hospital is that we will be reimbursed $20 million. That's it. And so as I looked at this agreement, knowing that there were many advantages with it, yet the risk was too great. And I think we see a lot of that going on in the state of Michigan right now. I think we see the use and abuse of our brownfield tax dollars that is set aside to be environmentally used for environmental cleanups. I think it's another tool for development and developers. I also work for the public schools right now, and as an administrator that works there, I'm on the front lines with the teachers, the administrators, and often the school board members who are divided. And they're divided because they do not have enough money to make the decisions that are best for our students so that they have the 21st century technology to be competitive in a global economy. We have a state that wants to give tax breaks to attract business, but Michigan was built on skilled labor and educating our citizens. And that's how we attracted our business. That's how our industry was successful. And as we change to a more complex, more skilled industry, whether it's with our cars, whether it's with computers, even with mining, we have to make sure that if we're going to try and attract new businesses, especially the high tech, and we want our kids to stay here and we want our citizens to have good jobs, we have to invest in our schools. And that's our K-12 and that's our public universities as well. We can't put this risk on the students, can't put the risk on the families where they have to take out second mortgages on their homes. This is crippling our state, and the students aren't able to stay here because they have so much debt when they get out. Lastly, and one thing that I think will differentiate me from other candidates is my conviction that we have to invest in our roots. We are still a mining community, and we are still a community where our timber industry can flourish and go further. Last year when I stepped up here, the announcement of the Empire Mine came. And my first reaction was, why aren't we doing more? Where's our leadership in terms of stepping up and saying, wait a minute, we're not out of ore. We live on one of the largest bands, the largest veins of iron ore in the world. There are only 10 of them. You can't go and mine for iron ore anywhere, and we have that resource here. What we saw this last year is everything that we worked hard to do in 2008 with that Mustang pellet that would have extended the life of our Empire Mine. It went to Minnesota. And it went there because their state legislators, their House and their Senate leaders have been actively, strategically planning for how to make sure that mining isn't a forgotten industry in their state. And I think we've done that here. I don't think we've carried that message down to Lansing. I don't think we've stepped up to the workers, the steel workers and their families to say, we're going to fight for you. And I think that there's still opportunity right now to reinvest in our mines on the Marquette Iron Range. And so I think it's important when you go to vote for this election, and I encourage people to take this election very seriously. In the next 6 years, a lot can be done to move our state forward and invest in people and invest in our roots, what we are here, or not. And I believe I have the integrity, I believe I have the work ethic, and I believe that I've been the voice of the people, standing up, making those tough votes, making the hard decisions, so that our communities are better for the people that live here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, board member comment. Anybody have anything to share or add? Keith?
With Community Days coming up on August 5th, we have to sort of change a couple rules or something as far as alcohol and that on our, over at the Community Days, so we have to, I'll leave Randy the right way to proceed with that. But
What the board has done the last couple of years is you've simply agreed to waive your no alcohol policy at the Lions Field Recreation Area specifically for the duration of this event only. No, this is just allowing people to bring their own. We are not providing alcohol at the facility.
But we will have sheriff protection and stuff like that there at the scene, so it helps.
So that's all that would be necessary, would be for the board to authorize waiving that policy for this particular event that we're sponsoring.
You need a motion for that?
That would be only Friday and Saturday.
I don't think you even need a motion. I think you just need to be a reference in the minutes. You're not eliminating the policy. You're simply waiving it for this specific event.
Well, just to be clear, I'll make a motion that we waive the alcohol policy for Lions Field for, what is it, Friday?
Friday and Saturday.
Friday, August 4th.
4th and Saturday, August 5th.
And Saturday, August 5th.
And I'll second it.
Yes, sir.
What happens if we don't?
Technically,
Well,
we
then folks
can't-
will be in violation and the sheriff will be writing tickets.
And we'll have the whole field arrested.
I just asked a question. What
Yeah,
if-
yeah.
what if we-
Right now, we do have a no alcohol policy at all of our facilities. In the last 2 years, we have waived that to allow the folks that are primarily there for the softball tournaments to bring their liquid refreshments along with them. And we go into the evening with musical entertainment, and folks generally like to come and have a drink while they're listening to the music. So we waived the policy the last 2 years to allow them to do that, but we also patrol it and police it, so it doesn't get out of hand.
I would further amend that motion to 11 p.m. each night, because I think they're done by 11 p.m. anyway.
We start knocking off at 10.
Yeah, so I would say 10 p.m. each night. I'll amend the motion for that.
Accept.
Just a point of order, can we make such a motion during board member comment?
Yes, you can.
Can you?
Yes. Anytime during the business meeting, you can make a motion. Am I correct, Roger? Yes.
That's a good question.
You all right with that now?
I'm fine.
Okay, just checking.
Anything else?
I just brought up just just to clarify it, because some people are gonna ask why and that. So I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, well, there is a great debate about that because it is a family, we're championing this as a family-friendly event. No different than your home, I guess, from that standpoint. We have had, a couple of events that have been handled quietly and effectively, but generally we don't have anybody getting out of hand. We have staff there during the entire event, so we keep a pretty tight rein on it.
Okay, that's fine. I think we just need to get that out to the public. And I do so.
That's part of our job too, is to ask those questions.
Yes, absolutely.
I know the answer, but the public doesn't, so that's, we have to do that too. Dan?
There's no liability on the township itself?
We have a rider. We have a specific rider for that
Okay.
event.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yes, Ernie.
The gentleman brought up about chickens within the township. I'm just wondering, should we
Oh, he left.
go back and revisit that subject again and see if it's worthwhile?
Your planning commission is discussing that item, and I don't know if trustee Wiegand wants to make comment to that since he's a part of the planning commission.
It has been visited recently in the last year. And it has been addressed as board approved, any changes that were made in the text amendment. So if you want to go back and revisit it, you can do that. But the ordinance is very specific as to how many chickens you can have and whether you can or cannot have any roosters. Very specific ordinance. And I'm not sure where that gentleman falls outside of the ordinance, but you'd have to get more specifics from Jason as far as he was advised that he needs to remove them.
I was hoping he'd just get a hold of Jason.
But I can tell you, I can tell you that in certain parts of the township, there are what we term renegade chickens that have escaped. They're basically wild, and you will see them in the Center Street area, in the northwest part of the township on occasion. They are pretty wary, but they are out there.
There are restrictions as to how close they can be to property lines, whether they can be in the front yard or the backyard. There's a number of restrictions in the zoning ordinance that you'd have to take a look at.
Yeah. And it's pretty detailed.
Probably heading for the city.
Sarah can deal with that then. Anybody else want a question? Randy?
Yeah, I wish everyone wouldn't have left, but August 5th, which is our community day, I will be in the office from noon to 2 p.m. to receive or give out any absentee ballots for the August 8th election. So far, for our election, we've given out in district and precinct 1, which is the north side, given out 89 AV ballots so far. And on the precinct 2, which is our south side, south of 41, we've given out 117. So
Almost 200.
we are giving out some. So you have till Monday preceding the election to get one if you can't be here for Tuesday. Tuesday, polls open at 7 a.m. They close at 8 p.m. And make sure if you have an absentee ballot, it gets here before 8 p.m. on Tuesday, because if it gets here any later, unfortunately, it will not count. So I agree with Treasurer Johnson, and I think the chicken thing, I remember vaguely about us approving that, and there was certain parameters, so we do have something on the books, but I'm sure the gentleman maybe, I can't speak for his situation, but there's probably a reason why he got a letter. So
Well, most likely he got a letter because the issue was raised by another resident and it's information gathering at this point.
yeah. And I wish the folks again were here. Speaking about the township board, I think it was last year or the year before, I got a request from a resident, and they weren't happy about something to an adjacent property owner. And I asked them 2 questions. I said, is it against the law? The resident said no. Is it against the township ordinance? And they said no. So I said, what do you want me to do about it? I can't really tell the adjacent property owner what to do on their property. And that ended the conversation. So I think when you get requests like that, there's two questions to ask. And as the FOIA coordinator, anytime anyone has an issue with something, we have FOIA forms come in. I will let you know if you can get the information or not. And I think we pride our board on being open. And all our meetings are on YouTube. Unfortunately, they're not going to be televised any longer because of charter. But I think we pride ourselves on trying to be as open as possible. And I guess that's all I have to say.
Sometimes it's just education too, though, Randy. Most people, there's a lot I learned since I've been behind this table. It's not what you think it is. Yeah,
And like I said, if any resident has any questions about what they can and can't get, just come in and speak with us. And I've been here a long time, over 10 years now, and I don't think we've been very unreasonable with any folks. So.
There are times when we do receive questions that we really can't answer because the item is still under review, either legal review or ordinance review, and that was the case with with some of the questions that were asked when the individuals came in about the building permit. We didn't have answers at that point because we had received it and it was under the vetting process, so there was really nothing we could share with them at that point.
John?
I just want to comment that I think we have to be understanding about people who are in a subdivision where they are abiding by the covenants themselves. They think that there is a rule and there is something followed. It isn't, I find it understanding that they would come to us and think that we could enforce their covenants. That's what they've been living by. It's the rule of the community. And so it has brought them here, and I think it has brought the board to be aware that perhaps we'll have to give some direction to the Planning Commission to have a greater understanding of just what their problem was that they brought to us. But knowing how people abide by those covenants, it's understandable why they came.
I'm glad they did. Yes, Pete?
And John, to follow up on John, and where do they go from there? When they get somebody who violates it, what do they do about it? So, but I just wanted to bring up on August 5th is our community days, and that's seemed like a long way, but it's only 18 days away. 18 days. We're gonna have music. We're gonna be food there. We're gonna have the fire truck, the state police for fingerprinting. We're gonna have face painting. We're gonna bouncy houses. Ball games are starting on Friday night. I guess we got 9 or 10 teams.
Well, yeah, the softball tournament will start Friday night. The activities on Saturday will start at noon.
It'd be fun just to watch Randy and his team there to play ball and see. But it is, and it's going to have music up most of the day. It goes until about 10 o'clock at night. So it's going to be, I think it's a good time. Bring your lawn chair, enjoy the evening. August 5th at Marquette Lions Club.
And if you want to watch
Lions Recreation
Lions
Area.
Field, yeah,
Behind Vanderboom School, as we still call it. So come and enjoy.
If you want to watch some good softball Friday night as well. On Saturday, however, I do want to remind everyone that Cherry Street will be closed off to traffic, with the exception of emergency vehicles and the residents of Cherry Street. So the ball players and that, please do not on Saturday park on Cherry Street. We'll have to have your cars moved if you do.
Dave?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on some of the suggestions that I've heard come out of the board tonight about covenants and whether they're following it or not. I think we're making some assumptions that the gentleman that's putting up the addition is not following some covenants that we have not reviewed. I think that's a large assumption on our part. We're here to make sure that he's following the zoning ordinances, and that's the extent of our involvement. And if the residents of Bishop Woods wants to enforce their covenants or determine whether he's in violation of the covenants, that's up to the residents of Bishop Woods. I don't think this board should be taking a stand on any suggestion that he's not.
No, and also the board and the residents need to understand that the ordinances apply to the zoning districts. The application to the Trowbridge Urban Residential District is different than the application to the Rural Residential District, which is where this property resides, rural residential. It's a less restrictive covenant. You got me doing it. It's a less restrictive ordinance, so and that's the difference, and that's why the zoning administrator has to spend so much time evaluating these applications when they come in, because it starts first and foremost with what zoning district are you in, and then how do the ordinances apply to that district. And that's where the difference comes in. It would probably not have been allowed in the urban residential district because of the size of the lots. You would not have had the setbacks. So, when you get to the rural residential, you have much larger lots, much larger pieces of property, so the setbacks are different. So it's not as easy as it sounds.
I'm glad they came ahead.
Sure,
To
absolutely.
the meeting, talked to us, they understand a little bit more than they did before. And as far as their own covenant, they know what they have to do with that, so. And we're not responsible for that.
Yeah, and I was told that the covenants are not being enforced, so.
I don't think they exist. I don't think any
There
covenants were ever
existed, there,
drafted.
2007 it was 2000.
But I don't think they were ever adopted.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, they're adopted, it's
So
signed
then,
and everything.
that's up to them if they want to work on that. Anything else? Okay, we can go on. Staff reports. Well, we can't start with Public Works because he's not here. I'm thinking he doesn't have anything. I did put a spreadsheet together tonight, and I will give it to him tomorrow, to Superintendent Page, because the questions come up a few times about lost water and the percentage, and is that important, and what is the number, and what should we do about it, or should we? So I've just put a quick spreadsheet together, and I'll give it to him tomorrow and see if he can fill in the blanks and give us a little bit more information, because Dave has said it's not really, well, last month's report was the first time, so, it's a work in progress. Yes, Dave?
Well, yes, I guess my only comment was I was surprised at the last report that wasn't received warmly by me as not being informative, that it just simply disappeared on this report. Apparently, if you don't like it, you're just not going to get any more.
Well, we still got the graphs and
Struck me
stuff.
as strange.
They were a little clearer
Not the
to
case.
follow. Water production and purchasing is down quite a bit.
Yes.
18, 20, 30%.
It's been a very wet
Very
period,
wet.
though.
And that's understandable. Yeah, so
Just
we're
a-
not selling as much.
Just a further comment on that. I for the water loss, I don't think you can, I think you gotta look at it a yearly or 6 months. I don't think you can look at it month to month. You need a longer period of time to look at it. And I would just like to see us look at it yearly or 6 months. I don't think it's board business every month to deal with it, in my opinion. So I think it should be looked at yearly.
I'm going to separate you two. Go ahead, Dave.
If you can look at it yearly, with all due respect, then you can look at it monthly because the information comes from the same source. And if you recall, the only reason this whole issue come up is because we were going to spend $4 million based on a projected water loss of some 28%, which we've not been able to establish as fact. And I think you have to look at it on a regular basis to establish that we are not losing water that we should otherwise. You need to see the changes and the trends to know that and it's not for the board's information. I'm convinced that nobody's looking at it. Or we would have had better information to base the expenditure of $4 million. I just think we need to get a better look at it. We need to look at it on a regular basis so that we can see trends and see spikes, and so that we can, and I don't think annual is enough. I don't really care if it's in the packet every month. I just think somebody needs to be looking at it.
Well, and if we get it in a format, I think this is the evolution of it. We'll get the information that we want. You keep doing this. Then you can look at it or not. Okay? So, Public Works, we're gonna do that. Fire Department, they're just sitting there with bated breath. They just can't wait. And watch, we'll just start and the alarm will go off.
All right. Fire Chief's report.
Yes, sir.
Does board members have any question of me? Oh, thank God, it's David.
Well, we didn't have a chance to look at the board didn't look at your timeline. Hadn't seen that yet.
Yeah, I just kidding, David. I would
So they may have
bring to your
questions.
attention, though, the incident type period comparisons. To take a look at, how we've jumped significantly here. Those that question whether we should be exploring enhancing our EMS system and our response capabilities, all you have to do is look at this time comparison for June over the years, and you can see EMS makes up a very large component of our business.
Use the microphone a little bit. Direct it more at you, Ron. so
Okay.
it'll be better.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, much better.
So I just wanted, the rest of it, essentially, it's the same reports that I generate monthly for you. But I wanted to pay attention, to this last June of 17. We had just a huge jump in EMS response. So it has gradually gone up, but we've never seen, an increase of this magnitude before. So I don't know if it's a trend. I don't know if it's just happens to be the volume of traffic we had going through the township or whatever this particular time period, but we surely have seen an increase in runs across the board, particularly in EMS. We are right now, our run volume for 2017, we are 2 months ahead of last year. In other words, our run volume, we didn't hit this figure until September of last year, in any year prior, so we have seen an increase. Randy?
Ron, out of the, say in the last 2 months, with the medical runs, how many of those could we transported just a rough guess out of.
Well, because our peak period continues to be from 8 to 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock period. The bulk of that period, which we have 3 staff on hand, unless one of the other ambulances literally happened to be going through the township at the time, we would have captured probably about 75% of those runs. As I explained to the board, the way the billing system works for EMS, you have to physically transport the patient to have any mechanism to bill Blue Cross, Blue Shield, any other insurance provider. So that is why we looked, at the transport capability side of it. And during the day, it's just a matter of whatever unit gets there first has the ability to transport. If the run is an ALS run that requires treatment above the level that we can provide as a BLS system, the ALS ambulance is not canceled. They come on scene, we transport the patient, the ALS paramedic from that rig will get into our rig as we transport to the hospital. So it doesn't compromise the level of care for the patient. It's just a matter of what rig gets there first, has the abilities to transport, and then we bill for transporting and for the appropriate mileage from the incident scene to the hospital.
Anything else for the chief? Pete?
Ron, we hear the sirens all during the day, but what time do they shut them off at night? No,
Well,
you don't hear them at night.
The big one.
Yeah, the main siren on the water tower tank, I believe, unless they've changed it, it goes off at 9 p.m. It no longer
It
sounds
comes
at
on
9
at
p.m.
8 though, 9 to 8 or something like that. It's 8 in the morning, I think, comes on.
Yeah, 8 o'clock.
A lot of residents don't hear it when they're got calls after 9 o'clock. Then even though we know that they're out there. But
No, those are paged calls.
right.
Yeah, we've done that for a number of years. We did, we fielded complaints, families with young children, especially in the immediate proximity of that Cox tank. So we especially now, it's so much different, 42 years in the fire service. I can tell you, we've made huge advances in notification and alerting, and now all of our members carry belt pagers, so, I mean, the siren is nice, it's a warning system. We would also keep it as a hazardous weather warning system. If something came out and we had to try to alert residents, we have that ability to sound the siren, put out a public message through the media. But it really, 99% of our response now is all handled through our pagers. So
Are you ready to go right now?
we are.
Are you, the billing all set up and everything else? You got all that process done?
The ambulance?
The billing of the,
No, that's
No.
one of the agenda
your
items.
agenda.
okay.
Nope, that's,
I'm just
we
jumping
we
ahead.
are, the other thing I passed out to the board members just prior to your meeting starting was our implementation. And, we don't need to go into that at depth at this point, but we are 75 to 78% down the road. Anything we can control, we are implementing, and we are making good progress on. The potential for any holdup is going to be once we receive our inspection and we have all the required criteria on the ambulance, then all the paperwork shuffle goes to Lansing, and it's just a matter of where we fall in the queue and how soon they'll be able to adjust our licensing requirements.
Other questions for him?
Thank
Okay.
you.
Then you can do your next step.
Yes, at this point, I would like to ask Amanda Abelius to step up here. Amanda joined our fire department in December last year. She was on about 3 days, and we had a major structural fire. So she basically got the baptism of fire, I guess. Jesse, you can come up as well. Jesse is going to do the actual pinning of the badge for Amanda. All right. Amanda, I'll read the first paragraph, and then as soon as I'm finished, I'll pause, you repeat it. Sentence number 1, of course, insert your name in there, and then we'll just follow through the rest of it. You have the same exact paragraph set up as I have here, so. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the state of Michigan against all enemies, both foreign and domestic.
I, Amanda Abelius, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the state of Michigan against all enemies, both foreign and domestic.
I pledge to serve the citizens of the Charter Township of Marquette with compassion, courage, and integrity under the appointment of Marquette Township Fire and Rescue.
I pledge to serve the citizens of the Charter Township of Marquette with compassion, courage, integrity under the appointment of Marquette Township Fire and Rescue.
According to the laws and the standards of the state of Michigan and the Charter Township of Marquette and the departmental policies of Marquette Township Fire Department.
According to the laws and standards of the state of Michigan and Charter Township of Marquette and the departmental policies of Marquette Township Fire Department.
To the best of my skills and abilities, so help me God.
To the best of my skills and abilities, so help me God.
Jesse, would you please pin Amanda for us? I'd like to add, Amanda has gone through firefighter 1 and 2, and she's also got her hazmat operations certification. So she is ready to roll and has in fact been on calls since last December. So. You got to run the gauntlet.
Yeah. And I guess,
Randy, you want me to introduce our 2 staff members? Or are you going
well,
to?
I guess as long as everybody's up there, several weeks ago, I sent out to board members a notice that we've had some turnover in the Building and Grounds Department. Greg Britton has retired. Chad is going to be transferring into the vacant position in Public Works. So this evening I would like to introduce to you our two new Building and Grounds caretakers, who are Amanda Arbelius and Andrew Wilder. Andrew, if you'd like to step forward. These two individuals are, in addition to being our on-call firefighters, they're also now full-time staff members of the township working in Building and Grounds, and they will be, they are currently training with Chad and Gabe right now, and they will be continuing with Gabe after Chad transfers to Public Works September 4th. So, so they're getting kind of a dual indoctrination here. Amanda being a new firefighter, and Andrew's been with us now for, I think, 15 years, if I'm not mistaken. He was also a firefighter 1 and 2 and an EMT. So they will be on the day shift to also be available to respond on the day shift as firefighters. So welcome. I just wanted you to meet those folks.
And I'd like to thank Manager Gerard at this time for his vision to allow them to support the fire department. One of our primary requirements per ISO is we cannot roll an engine unless we have a minimum of 4 staffing on it. So this now makes the ability for us to respond during the day is a given. We're going to be able to respond. We know we'll have 4 staff members. That's a huge step forward for us. The next time we go through ISO recertification, we'll be able to demonstrate that we have minimum manning on board the engines during the daytime hours. Evening is never a problem. You know, we still have a lot of traditional 8 to 5 workers. So daytime was a big gap for us, and so these appointments really are a win-win for us, because it boosts the fire department, gets us up to ISO minimum standards, and we have the ability to use these people during the day. So I'd like to thank the board, and I'd like to thank Manager Gerard for giving us the ability to have these people. It's a big step forward for us.
And one thing that Ron didn't mention when he was pinning Amanda is that she will be beginning EMT training here in the fall, is it? Say again? January. So she'll be beginning her EMT training in January, so we'll have an additional EMT on the day shift.
Great.
Cool.
All right, thanks for coming,
Thank
guys,
you.
and sharing. Appreciate it. Be safe out there.
Jesse, Ron didn't introduce Jesse, but Jesse is also a firefighter with us.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Unfinished business, road project update. Probably falls to Dave.
I talked to UPEA to get an update today, and just for everybody out there that's wondering when things are going to happen, Baco is finishing the grading this week. And just to further explain the grading, that is where they're widening the roads to accept the bit curve. They're going to be 2 feet wider on each side. They're digging out the existing fill and putting gravel in and compacting it. They're getting that and ready in preparation for the crushing and shaping, which will begin Monday of this coming. That crushing and shaping operation is going to take place through the end of July, and on July 31st they're scheduled to begin their paving operations. Paving will be done through the first 2 weeks of August. The last 2 weeks of August will be used for driveway restoration, pouring the concrete and tying the asphalt in for everybody's driveways. That should be done by the 1st of September, and the first 2 weeks of September is going to be slope restoration, planting grass seed, and that types. And that should put us on schedule. We should be done by mid-September, barring any big weather delays. And just in addition to that, there are some local drainage issues that are remaining, which are primarily on Center Street and Granite Streets. And as I've stated before, resolution of these issues are not within the scope of the road rehab project. The manager sent an email to the board. It should be in your packet, or you should have got an email on it, outlining some of the steps that have been taken in concert with Superior Watershed Partnership and Land Trust. And if the manager wants to expand on that way.
It's okay with you?
It's okay with me.
Okay.
Either way, if you wanted to go forward, basically following your last meeting, in the discussion that took place with regard to some of the drainage issues, I did get in touch with Carl Lindquist, who you've met before. Carl was here not too long ago, looking for support for a 2% request to the KBIC, which the board supported, for the purpose of a Native American youth program that he has under a grant. I had a discussion with him about what possibility there may be with a partnership between the township and the Superior Watershed Partnership under some kind of a grant program that could potentially assist us with some of these drainage issues. And he said he thought there might be. So we did have a sit-down. We had a meeting, talked about what some of these issues were, and he felt that they definitely, at least the issues on Center Street and Granite Street, sounded like something that they certainly could help us with to address. He has a very specific grant that provides 4-person work crews along with tools, equipment, and a vehicle to go out and address issues that impact the watershed in some manner, whether it's to create a wetland, to preserve a wetland, or to direct movement of water to where it should be. So I did put him in touch with Trustee Wiegand, and I think they came to some understandings and agreements on where they can go. One of the things that I particularly liked in the discussion with Carl was he indicated that these folks, they are adults, they're not kids. These are adults on this particular grant, 4 adults per crew, do have the ability to subcontract as they need for either equipment or additional resources. And I suggested to him that I know of a particular government agency that could probably use some funding to accomplish some of these projects they may even have some responsibility for. So I suggested he get in touch with the Road Commission in terms of assisting these crews in correcting some of this drainage issue. That was pretty much it.
Any questions for them? Okay, thanks for that. Request for distribution of 2% gaming funds. This sample letter is in your packet. John had asked I was going to say last month, but it's still this month, the last meeting, to have us consider this. John, do you want to speak to it?
Only that it occurred to me once we knew how much the money was needed for the ambulance, and respectfully, the township board passed the okay to have the tax, it's very minimum tax, but a tax put on the people to pay for the ambulance. And what I suggested was that we should send a letter to the KBIC Council asking them to consider putting us on their agenda for approval of that sum, and that we needed to send a letter to them requesting that we can ask them to consider that. The reason for it being on the agenda is that we need to send a letter, an action to end the need to tax our citizens for the needed funds for the ambulance must be delivered to KBIC soon if the township hopes to have a positive response arrive before the scheduled approval of the ambulance tax begins to be collected. I think it's a win-win for the township. It's a win for the Native community to make a contribution to end a tax. Just think about that. Ending a tax by them funding that sum that we are offering to pay for the ambulance. That's all it's about. It's simply asking them to consider it, and that's where it ends.
Comments? Thoughts? Do you want to make a motion to this effect?
I move that the letter that's been prepared asking them to consider that be sent.
I'll support.
Motion and support. Yes, Dave.
Just a couple quick comments here, and while I support the concept of requesting distribution of 2% funds to further community projects, I also support the ability of the KBIC to request the board's support for their bid for reservation status. Whether this board agrees with it or not, it has yet to be decided. But what I cannot support is that one has been inextricably linked to the other at the last meeting. And I can't support it because it just seems that it's one hand washing the other was the comment. And so I can't support this motion.
Anything else? Pete?
Well, I struggle with this because I don't want this to be the hook to agree to the land and going into trust. I really struggle with that, and I'm not in favor of that one bit, and so I will be voting against it also. Just because the implement, it's saying, if you give us this, we'll do this. And that's the way I feel about the letter. Even though it might not mean that way, it's the way I read it.
The only thing I was thinking, or one of the things I was thinking was I would really rather not ask them to fund it. If we were going to agree to this, I would say to participate in the purchase of, or however you'd want to word it, and not ask them for a whole amount. But I think unless, I mean, we're a government, unless we specify that we're going to do something for somebody, I don't know that that should be assumed. I don't know how I feel about this request. We're entitled, just like everybody else, to make the request.
And there are forms for that, the 2%, when you fill out the form, you send a letter in.
So I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about this either.
I would call the board's attention to the fact that unsolicited, the Native community made a contribution that would aid in the funding of the tunnel under 41. I would also call to your attention that they unsolicited have helped us with emergency equipment along the water's edge. They do these things in their own way, but unless you indicate some interest in having them do that, it will not be on their agenda. You have to decide yourself whether you feel there's an obligation that goes beyond this letter. This letter simply says we are asking for you to consider it. They will decide in their own way whether they want to or not. And what better way could you request a contribution than one that would eliminate a tax? Just think about that. How many times do you, on a board, have an opportunity to end a tax? And that's what you'd be doing. And you'd be doing it with no ties, no obligations to do anything else. You've simply asked them to consider it. If you have any further information that ties it to anything else, then speak about it now, because it isn't there. You're only asking for a contribution to be considered. If you feel an obligation, that's your own problem.
If there's a way of sending this letter, it's just coincide with the way the 2% money application?
That might be a Randy
You
question. I don't
attach
know
this
that
with
we've-
that application?
I don't think we've asked them for anything. We usually do it for everybody else. I don't think the township
Typically.
itself has ever
We
requested
did,
funds.
we did request for the water rescue. We did that by letter.
That was kind of in conjunction with the city's action with
It
their
was.
fire department, so it wasn't anything we were really asking for ourselves. Dave?
I based my comments on the way this was presented initially, and the two were spoke of in the same presentation. And that's where I link the connection and whether it's there or not. It is not from my perspective, but it certainly has the appearance of being there. And that's why I made my statement.
I don't think the letter in and of itself does.
I don't think the letter in and of itself does either. But I'm saying the way it was presented initially
That was the intent.
leaves some question.
Randy, do you know if there's a form we need to fill out to submit with the letter? Is there a process?
Yeah, the KBSC has an application form. It's a grant request form, basically, for 2% funds. And we could, certainly we could do that. We could fill one of those out and say, I know Jason has sent those in routinely for other folks. And for grants for Recreation Committee, he has sent those in, asking for grants.
Yes, Dave? Dan?
Is it necessary to put an amount in there? I understand John would like to eliminate the tax completely, but if we maybe just, if they know what I'm sure they know what the amount is, but maybe just a wording of it as any contribution to help us.
Participation in the purchase of a $40,000 emergency vehicle.
I mean, we could still have that in that letter saying this is the amount that we're striving to get. Any amount would be appreciated.
Bernie?
When we first was discussing this, I got to thinking on the same wavelength that Dave did too, and that is there some area that they're going to try and move in direction as to what they would like to have us do at the same time in that. So I was a little concerned with that. And what Dan said by changing the wording of the excuse me, wording of the letter, and maybe beneficial laying it out that way, and that would they support financially the obtaining of the ambulance and that, rather than putting a dollar amount in there, and let them come up with a dollar amount more than anything else in that. Different than that, but
John?
If you begin to tailor a revision to the letter, what you'll end up doing is leaving us with a tax amount that would be reduced perhaps, but it would still be, you'd need to go after that tax. So putting the sum in there was, the reason for putting the sum in was because it was at that meeting that it was decided how much was required, and then it established how much we needed to have in the way of a tax. If you begin to negotiate a revision to that, then you end up having to repeat the tax problem again, some way. You could, it's conceivable you could, let's say they reduced it, but not totally, then you would end up having to have to tax for the remainder. I just don't want it to be complicated. I took the number that was offered that came from the fire department as to how much they needed so that we established how much the tax would be. That's the only reason that sum is in there. But it would, if it was passed that way, they can think about it and they can do whatever they think is appropriate. And they will. They have a board that looks at these things. And the sum is there, but that doesn't mean that that's what you're going to get. In fact, you have no guarantee that you're going to get anything. It's just a request that we ask them to consider it. and we've put the total sum there because it would end the tax. I think that's a real win-win for the township to end a tax, and that's why the total number is there. Opportunity. Trust me, I don't think it's going to happen frequently at this board or the boards that's going to follow us. So here's an opportunity to do something that's not just for this board's advantage, but it's to end a tax that's going to be placed on the citizens of this community. Wouldn't it be great, come December, that we could proudly say, we've been given a gift that ends it, and that we will end the plant tax. That's pretty important, pretty powerful.
Dan?
I concur. It would be very nice to get that amount so we could end the tax, but to give them the opportunity to present what they can afford to present. I would rather get 25,000 from them than them say, well, we can't afford 40,000. Therefore, if they can afford it, great. Push it. Try to get it pushed through. I don't know. I'm on the fence.
Well, a lot of our residents donate to them too.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
it's not
Oh yeah.
I was down there the other day because we had a company from out of town, and quite a few of our residents are here sort of donating to them. So.
Yes.
Dave?
I don't want any of my comments to be construed as questioning the intent of the KBIC, because I think they have been more than generous towards projects in this township. And that is not my intent. My intent is to question the way it was presented at the board.
Anything else? We have a motion on the floor to send this letter.
I'll request a roll call vote.
Okay.
Trustee Marks?
Yes.
Secretary is yes. Trustee Wiegand?
No.
Trustee LaRue?
No.
Trustee Everson?
I am on the fence on that.
Has to be yes or no. Can't be on the fence. That don't count.
I'll say yes. I'll try to get this pushed through. I mean, I hope that, I just don't like the language.
Treasurer Johnson
Yes.
and Supervisor Durant.
I'm going to say no, because I don't like the wording. I think it can be changed.
The motion carries 4-3. The letter will be sent.
Okay, then we'll have to have staff get the
form
application and
send it.
submit it. Okay, thank you. Discussion on Township 492 corner lot property. I did send you why is this not working? An update in my supervisor's report. I have not talked to Steve, so I don't know that there is anything to discuss. Actually, I left it on here just in case somebody had something to bring up or a thought, because I asked you to kind of think about. We didn't take a motion or anything. We kind of had a consensus, I think, to just leave it. Just wanted to make sure.
I think what
saw-
initiated the discussion was a suggestion from the agent that you reduce the price.
Mhm.
I think that's what started the
Hoping everybody
discussion.
would think if they wanted to go that direction or not. I think Dan was first.
Is Steve not scheduled to come and talk with us and give us some kind of an update? I mean, you had mentioned that he was going to be here at the last meeting.
I had thought he would. He said he would talk with us after the 4th, and I told him it would be on the agenda and suggested that he be here to answer questions, and I haven't heard back from him.
You've left messages, and
So,
and how binding is our contract with him?
It's binding. It's a year contract.
Well, that's why I wasn't in favor of it before, but if we're stuck with it, we're stuck with it.
Well, we can change the price. I mean.
No, that's not my point. I
Okay,
just want to
just the
know
contract
if he's
itself.
doing anything whatsoever to try and sell it. If he's advertising, if he's contacted people, if people have contacted him. I mean, he doesn't have to give us names, but is he moving forward with it, or is he just sitting on it, waiting for somebody to come to him and say, here's your money?
That's what I was looking for when I contacted him, some kind of an update as to
Can we
what
try
he's
to
doing.
see if we
Yeah, I
can't
can
get
do
him
that
here?
again, sure.
Okay.
Who's up next, Randy?
Yeah, I thought about this the other day, and I think that we can, he works for us, the realtor. We set the price. I think we sit on it because I think the property is going to get more valuable down the road. It's not costing us any money. Highway 41 property is getting sucked up pretty fast, and the second tier development's going to probably start after that's gone. And that's a nice little parcel there that it's not costing us any money right now to sit on it and wait till we get the appropriate offer, because selling that property at the offer that we've suggested was going to help pay off these facilities. So I think we should hold fast to that so we can get, the most money to offset our facilities cost.
I agree.
Pete, I saw a hand. Go ahead, Dave.
The suggestion for the lower price is some 20% lower than it was listed for. And if you sold it for that lower price, and I'm sure Randy must have some numbers handy, how long would it take you to realize the taxes from that piece of property to offset the reduction you took in price? And I think it's going to be several years.
Well, plus the 6%.
Yes, plus the 6%. So I'm not in favor of lowering the price, and I'm a little disappointed that the listing agent isn't here to talk to us about it.
Okay, I'll ask him to come. How's that? We can get a little clarity in this. I'm just trying to get some of this stuff off of our plate because he had mentioned that the price was the inhibition.
When did we sign that?
January, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's
February?
Last January was, yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Well, ultimately, we control the price of the property. So, we can get advice from the realtor, but we control the price, and if we don't want to sell it for that, we don't.
Well, we don't have to go down as low as he suggested either, or he's saying is more practical. We can go down 5,000, 10,000, $50 if we want. That's a
Well, just like when we sold the Old Township Hall, we negotiated with, the person or the company, and we got what we thought was a fair offer. So.
Okay, let me just get a hold of him and see if we can get a more definitive report.
Move to the next agenda.
Yep. Unless for some reason he can't make the next meeting. Okay, new business. Policy governance again, 11A. We have some information again, and which is the handout that we got from Susan Radwan from her last presentation. And we had a lengthy discussion at the last meeting as to the direction we want to go. We don't have to implement this. I don't want the board to think that this is an all or nothing. I think if we at least try it and see how it works, I think having the report option, or it's actually not an option, it's part of the module that Randy would be giving. It would involve training his staff to get the information from them to him, and then him to put it into the format that's necessary for us to look at. I'd like to try it. We can always stop it. And some of the discussion that we had was about what about the communities that didn't continue using it. And I checked with Susan on that, and a big part of it is changeover. And not that that wouldn't happen here, but the boards that put that into place had the training, the supervisor did, the manager did, they knew how to function with it. And as I believe staff was the first in both cases, changed over. So that was a big, the incoming people didn't know anything about it, much less were familiar with it and could use it. So with the board changing and the staff changing, both of those communities struggled with trying to keep it operating. And I don't know how long they had it in place before that happened, but I believe the food co-op is using it right now, and we know MTA, because well, some of us were there, MTA is implementing it And it isn't any different than really what we're doing. The agenda would change a little bit. It just falls more to staff. We give them more latitude, but on the other hand, they're responsible to give us written reports of whatever the progress is or isn't. And if that isn't acceptable, it goes against Randy. It can show up in his evaluation. It can manifest itself in a bunch of different ways. But when we first started talking about this, the first thing I did when Dennis brought it to us was ask Randy what he thought about it. And he goes, I think it's great. It gives him parameters. It gives him structure. It gives his staff structure. And it keeps us from talking about a lot of things during our meetings that we don't need to deal with. It's operations. That's the only reason that I see, we've been harping for years about getting our meetings trimmed down. We need to deliberate and conduct business about things. We need to start looking at the future and come up with these. Our strategic plan can be rolled into this. The CIP can be rolled in. It's a thought process. It's a procedure. It's a philosophy that I think that the township can embrace, right down to the janitors. So I'd really like you to think about at least trying it. We've gone through a few sessions already on how this works. Susan can help us step through the next step if Randy thinks he needs help with the agenda. I don't see anything wrong with it. I guess that's my bottom line. Okay, which of you was first?
David.
I think every time we talk about whether we're going to adopt policy governance or not, we get all wrapped around forms and agendas, and all that stuff doesn't have to change overnight just because we adopt 10 principles of policy governance. It's a way of conducting business that we're agreeing to change. The forms can look anything like you want them to look like, and it certainly is going to be developed over time. It's not going to be, if we adopted it tonight, it's not a wholesale change at the next meeting. It's something you work into and get yourself educated about, and everybody's going to be here for another 3 years. Everybody ought to be educated by the time that gets done, including the public.
The only reason I mention the reports is because I think there's some hesitation on the part of losing, part of the board of losing something, control or awareness or.
I think that'd be something that'd be nice to be lost.
To a point, yeah.
I think we get way too wrapped around the minute details of how things are being conducted in the township as opposed to the general policies and the goals and where we want to be in 20 years. And I think that's the board's business.
Or even 5. Randy?
Well, I agree with Dave. This wouldn't happen overnight. Even if we approved it tonight, I wouldn't see it happening for a few months process, switching things over. We would still have to have a few more educational sessions with Susan, which I think worked pretty well with our video conference, which by the way is online, so if anyone would like to review them, they're there. It's very educational how this process works. And we could try it, as Lynn said, and I mean, if it doesn't work, Marquette Township's not going to cease to operate. We are still going to operate. We will just have to go back to the old way if it doesn't work. And I just think it's something we should try. We have a fail-safe if it doesn't. We'll just go back to the old way that we always conducted business before, which we spent a little money for education, which isn't all that bad, and we can just move forward. But I think what's good about policy governance is it gives you, in the beginning part of the year, it gives you an annual plan of work, which is your strategic plan, basically. And every board meeting you're talking about that. You're, instead of reacting to fires, you're being proactive a lot of time. And you do spend time in each meeting talking about the future and where we should be and where to be, trying to be ahead of the curve on certain items, which we don't do now. So I think that would be a positive moving forward, because it's always tough putting fires out all the time without trying to prevent the fires in the first place.
Pete, did you have your hand up?
My concern, when I've talked to a couple of different townships already, and I talked to the manager especially because I want to know how it's going to affect us. And one manager, I think Meridian, I believe, he just said, it's so much reports. He said, it's just overwhelming. And what we're going through right now, a transition of, we don't have enough help to take care of what we have. Randy's, I would say, needs a little breathing room right now. I wouldn't want to jump into it this year. I'd probably head for January. But expect him to get more reporting done, we need him to start getting our groups, our laborers and that, out there, getting structured, getting to be trained for different duties. Now we're just, we don't have enough people to take care of our playgrounds and that, right? It falls, a lot of it goes back on him. So if you say, oh, you didn't get it done, well, they tell me that the reporting is terrible. It's a very overbearing task to do it. And I don't know if we're ready right now anyway. I'd shoot for January, so.
The reports any way we want.
I know, but he said it's quite a.
Anybody down here first? Okay, go ahead, Randy. Just want to give everybody a one-time.
Just my response to Trustee LaRue. It doesn't. If we have policy governance or not, it's not going to affect our help, and we got enough help or not. It's just a way of differently structuring things that we're doing now. And I'm sure if the manager didn't feel comfortable with it, he would have probably mentioned something. He knows and has experience with policy governance, and I'm sure if he wasn't comfortable with it, he probably would have mentioned something about that. But like Lynn had said, we can structure our reports any way we'd like, and we don't have to. I just think it's a better way of doing things than we're doing now, in my opinion.
Bernie?
A couple things. Looking at this here and that, and I've been reading a lot of this on that, and I've been around since we first started in that too. So, a couple things come to mind. I look at that and I say, what is the benefit to the township? What is the benefit to the residents of the township, and what is the benefits to the board going this way? I think we have to answer those three questions in that, and go from there in that, and see how that's all going to work together in that. I think the other thing, if we go this way, I think we need to set down a procedure as to what are the steps that we have to accomplish as we go through in that. We can't take a big bite. I think it's all little bites that we're going to have to take as we move forward in that. The one thing I'm not enthusiastic about is the agenda. I think the agenda that was presented in relationship to this would be very confusing. It was confusing for me as a board member, but I think it'll be very confusing for the residents of the township too once they see it, because it's a whole different way of presenting things. I have no problem moving forward if we can lay out the steps that have to be done in a specific time frame. We can't take a big bite. We have to do little bites at a time. And if we can identify those, I think, as Pete was referring to, there's a lot of reports that have to be done in that. And how it's all going to get done, I don't know. But we're going to have to address it all.
A couple of those I can answer. Susan does have a timeline and a structure for what happens when. We didn't jump into that because I didn't want her to spend a lot of money, of our money, putting it into place without, having it cost us money to have her put it together before we had decided we were going to do this. The second thing I think is the benefit to this board, and Randy and I have talked about this a couple times, is the progressive thinking that we need to be doing. That's the most vital part of us being more streamlined, our meetings being more, we sit down and say, what is the business we have to take care of for the next meeting? And we each start making a list, and I've always asked you guys, is there something you want to talk about? But we wait on the strategic agenda, we wait on our CIP, we don't get it organized in a fashion that's proactive. So, like Randy says, we're putting out fires all the time. It's always, what do we have to deal with? Not, what can we look forward to doing? What do we need to work on? How do we see us growing? And, maybe Ron hadn't thought about the ambulance. Maybe that would have been something we could have had a discussion on. I mean, I can't think of what else is out there, expanding our parks. Maybe we do to write to the Lansing and tell them we want ownership of our roads. I mean, there's things we could be talking about. Maybe we want to put a pool in next door, you know, to help somebody. We need to talk about Heartwood. We need to find out what the city's going to do with it. There's things that we should be taking our deliberating time on these agendas and working on, instead of just going by what's brought to us. And that's my big thing. I want to look at the future and the whole, and how we can be better. Dave?
2 comments.
Dave?
First, I'd like to hear the manager weigh in, because it's mostly a change in the reporting that he does, and I would like to hear his opinion of all this. And then I'd like to follow that up with another comment.
Okay, Randy, please, if you have thoughts.
Be honest. Where's that spot at that I'm supposed to be on? Anyway, I am familiar with policy governance. As a member of the MERS board, we operate by policy governance, but we also have a staff of 130 people.
Well, you're not hiring anymore.
So, it works really well. I know the food co-op operates by it. One of our staff members was a former board member in the food co-op, and he thought it worked very well there. Much smaller operation, obviously, than what we have. I think it's going to come down to what Trustee LaRue has talked about, and most of the trustees, is how are you going to structure the report requirements, and how often are you going to want to have the reports, and that's the key. A lot of the things that we work on, your reports that you're going to get are going to be kind of like, remember what we talked about last time? Same thing this time. Until we get to a point of being ready to make a recommendation to the board to take an action. So from that standpoint, I'm not sure how much information the reports are going to provide for you, more than you get already by emails, and things like that as they're going along. But again, I think it'll depend on the format of the report, what you want to see and how you want to see it. And obviously, there's some thought that I would design the reports, but ultimately we all know where that's going to go. It's ultimately going to be the board designing, what it is you want to see, and then how do we present it and gather the information. We meet every 2 weeks. We don't meet once a month. So it's going to be, kind of a continuous process of addressing reports, and I think that's one of the things that thought I turned it off, but I guess I didn't. It's just vibrating. It's going to be one of the things that Pete heard from some of the managers, and I talked to some of them as well, the same ones. And basically what they said was the frequency of their meetings caused them to be doing nothing but doing reports. The next day they would start doing reports for the next meeting, because you have to have it, like we do, the Thursday before the Tuesday meeting. So you, in essence, got like 7 or 8 days to do the updated report. So if you wanted the reports on a monthly basis, or on a semi-monthly or quarterly or whatever, it's going to the whole thing will depend on how often you want to see those reports,
And what's in it.
and how detailed.
The other thing I forgot, Ernie, the third thing you mentioned was the agendas. And I did ask Susan, and again, she put me at bay until we decide what we're going to do, is to take, see, Randy was real comfortable with them. I thought they were very cumbersome. But take their recommended agenda and put it in normal words. What does that mean to the public, so they know? She's got, I didn't even bring one, but she's got different descriptions of each agenda item. And I thought, what does that pertain to for us? So she would have to do that, and I asked her to do one of our agendas. She did a little bit kind of for our session, but it wasn't as in-depth to say, where does all this stuff fall? And I think that's housekeeping stuff. We can come up with that, but it needs to be in our terms. Those are just models, templates.
And I don't think this transition's going to happen like overnight. It's going to be six-month project, probably, 5 to 6 month project. So.
Well, in all honesty, I think we have a very good communicating relationship, the board and myself and our staff members. I'm not going to be here forever, so I don't know what you're trying to do is you're trying to establish what your reporting relationship is, and my successor will have their own style, and I think that's what your policy governance would do, would be establish what the style of information is that you're going to get and how often you're going to get it. That would be consistent regardless of who's sitting in your seats or who's sitting in my seat. And that, I think that lends that air of consistency as you're going forward. One of the things we always talk about is institutional memory. I mean, it's I've been here for 15 years, and I've got a lot of stuff in here that when you have a question, I can answer some of those questions that most of you, other than possibly Ernie, haven't been involved with, because he's been on the board several times. Clerk Rattari's been on the board several times. But those are the kinds of things that you want to be able to preserve, is how do you find that information that predates when we became electronic? What happened 15, 20 years ago? Where is that information? How do you find it? Who has it? That's probably the most important part of what your reporting process is going to be, is pulling some of that information out fresh to support or to address current issues that you're working with, because you're not going to face anything that's really new. It's going to be something that's already happened in the past, or a variation of what's happened in the past. Governments aren't all that different. It's going to be utility issues, it's going to be public safety issues, it's going to be public service issues, it's going to be communication issues with the residents and the board, and those kinds of things. It's just going to be a different variation of it. Will we have chickens, or will we have pheasants? Will we have turkeys? You're going to get all that stuff. You live in the woods. I mean, realistically, we've got raccoons, coyotes, foxes, wolves, cougars. We've got all that stuff in Marquette Township. Whether the DNR acknowledges it or not, we've seen them. We know they're there. So how do you address those going forward as you continue to expand your boundaries, expand your boundaries of your residential areas? Look what's happening in Huron Woods. I mean, you've got bear issues in Huron Woods, just like North Marquette has bear issues. Those are the things that you have as you continue to expand your footprint, your human footprint, where humans weren't before. Those are the things that will keep coming up, and how do you address them? So, again, your policy governance is going to establish the format and how you want to see your information formatted, how often you want to get it, and in how much detail.
Go ahead, Dave.
In an effort to move this forward, I would move that we accept the principles of policy governance and move forward with transitioning to policy governance on a schedule as presented by the manager and approved by the board.
Sometimes you come up with some pretty good stuff.
Any support?
I'll support that.
Okay.
The only thing I would add to that motion, just because our policy manuals are outdated, I would like to add to that motion, if it's okay. I moved that the proposed policy manual that we talked about during those work sessions and we all had input on be adopted, and we rescind all old board policy and remand it to staff for consideration as operational policy. Because right now the policies we have in place are terribly outdated and don't really make a lot of sense in some instances. In the new policy manual that we created, even if this didn't go forward, we would have to be better than what we have now.
I would think as recommended by the manager and approved by the board would take care of that, because I would think that would be one of the first things on his list is to make that transition.
Well, actually, Susan recommended that we add that to the motion so that we're covered, because we have to rescind all the rest of the old policies once these are adopted.
Yeah, you're talking about board policies now, not the personnel policies,
Yeah, right.
or the operating policies.
That's the only reason she thought we
Okay,
should.
then I'd accept that amendment.
Dan, you're all right with that?
I'm all right with that.
Okay, Pete?
I just don't want us to fail, because after talking with these people, they've tried it, several different, in the same township, tried it different times, and they've failed, and I don't want us to fail. If we need a little more time to get into this thing, let's take the time, but let's not waste money if you think that we're gonna get into it and say, oh, hell, we should never got into it.
But
That's what I'm afraid of.
Why would that be a failure? Just because you try something and it doesn't work?
I know, but we know ahead of time others have failed, and I don't want to fail. I'm not.
Marquette Township is unique.
And
You don't know
exactly.
that yet.
And I don't like
We are
failing.
different. Yeah, which was first? I don't have your lights on yet.
Go ahead. On the additional to the motion about rescinding the current policies,
Board policies.
board policies, you're rescinding them, when are you gonna get the new ones in place? If you rescind them tonight, they're gone.
Yeah.
New
we
ones,
have
the
to
motion
do-
set.
the new ones would be implemented immediately.
The
as
same
board
way.
What are the
policy.
new policies?
Well, we develop them.
You did develop them
Yeah,
already.
we did
That's what I mean.
develop.
You
That's what we
develop
went through
them,
on the
and then
last
just
meeting.
put them in. Get rid of the old, put in the new.
So the ones you went through, the 3.11.1,
3.112.
All,
There they are.
If
In
you
the
want to
last
stay on
session.
it until we have these typed up or something, she sent them to me. She's got recommendations. We can put a time frame on it.
I just, when someone says we're gonna, delete or
Yep.
indicate right now, it's done and over with, and that.
Well, I guess that was my comment about putting it on a schedule presented by the manager, approved by the board. We can talk about policy implementation if it's recommended by the manager at the next meeting and approved by the board. I mean, we could do it that quick.
Well, part of that motion would be to rescind to staff the old policies as operational. So, I mean, you're not losing them. If they're needed, they go in the operational manual there. But for board, I mean, I think we had it pretty well covered for our board, because we spent 4 hours on this and went through each section. And the previous board spent many hours on it, so I think we pretty well thought out a lot of the issues that we had with the old policy manual versus the new one. And again, this policy manual traces or tracks every change. So if you, yeah, it's all dated, so any change you make is, and I have to do it. It has to be put in the back of this, and it's always tracked, so you know when things are changed. And we're not, even though we rescind the old, in my opinion, the old policies are useless anyway. So why do we even have them? Some of them are. They're outdated. At least this brings us up to current standards that we're all comfortable with.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we keep the original motion and leave the parts about the policies to the next meeting so that I can get you a complete set of the policies and what the agenda would look like and put it together. And then we can talk about if we're ready to implement the policies we put together. And if we're not, then maybe we put it off till the next meeting. But at least if we start the process, Susan can give me what you need to look at. How would that work? John?
I hesitate to offer this, but I think we would be much better off putting everything off on this till the next meeting. And here's one more reason why. I think our budget is pretty tight. We don't have a lot of wiggle room. I'd like to also have a report come in as to what we've spent to date with this year, with this consultant who is giving us a lot of good information. The consulting service that we are getting is worthwhile. I don't have a negative feeling at all about policy government or governance, but I would like to know from the people that are going to present this at the next meeting, what's the projected expense of the continued employment of this consultant because some of policy governance is going to require training of staff. It's going to require more meetings, more guidance. I'd like to know what that really means in the way of dollars and cents, and how comfortable are we going ahead with that. I don't have any problem with the motion made or the amendment to it, but I would like to know where we are dollars and cents wise as we go forward, because we're tight. We just don't have a whole lot of money. And we don't know what that consulting service is going to cost us for the training staff. We know that there is training of boards. We know that there's going to be training in general, and the supervisor is going to be asking for further information from this consultant. All of that costs dollars. Let's know where we are on that as well as we go ahead with the buying of it.
Good point. The last two sessions cost us 700 and something apiece. Throw out a number, was it 4,000 for the 2 days? That
Well, it
we
was
did,
around
2
4.
full days to have her here?
Around 4,000 when we met at the fire department.
And I know there was a big improvement over from the first session we had where she publicly came here, conducted a session. It was worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that we saved a lot of dollars by going to doing it
Teleconference.
Pardon?
Teleconference.
teleconference. So these are all good things, but let's get a handle on that as well while we're considering what we're buying into. Because as soon as you buy into this, that starts in motion the planning of training. So let's find out where we are, and we can always adopt it. We can adopt it at any meeting in the future. And we can do what Lynn has suggested. Let's give it some more trial periods. Let's do a couple of things and see how well we like what we're getting so far. I think we're going to appreciate every bit of it. But I think we need to test it before we bite it off as financially.
Okay, Randy?
Makes sense.
I know you have a motion on the floor, and I don't know if
Yep.
it is, do you have a second yet?
Yes.
We have a
Okay,
second.
motion, so you're in the discussion phase. I guess I have a question for Clerk Rattari, just to clarify where we're at. Seems to me what you're suggesting is to separate the policies from policy governance. I think your suggestion was to rescind the current board policies and adopt the new policies that the board's already agreed to. And you can do that separate from the adoption of policy governance, because you're talking about your operating policies is what you're talking
Yeah, that's what I
about.
said,
So
maybe
what you
separate motion.
what you might want to consider is for your next meeting to have the clerk give you a copy of the current as well as the proposed new policies to review. So at your next meeting, you could make a motion to either rescind the old policies and adopt the new or not. You'll have had the opportunity to review them, and then you can get into the discussion about going further into policy governance with agendas and all that other reports and everything else. I think the two can be mutually exclusive from them, because you're really what his motion, as I heard it, was to say, let's update the board's operating policies so you're ready to go into policy governance.
Yeah, but she did say we needed to take that procedure,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it was at the same time, but that's what I'm thinking is we separate the two, because they are separate. If we agree to go ahead with policy governance, and then we don't have to do that tonight, and then worry about the policy. That's why I said, let me give you what we've compiled.
Yeah.
She made a couple recommendations too, but we just kind of stalled it until we know what we're doing.
But I don't think the other board members have seen what the current policies are, the
That
current
would be-
board policies, the archaic
Those
board
2 books,
policies.
they'd almost have to come in and look.
Yeah, I would,
Well, there's a lot of stuff in there that are copies of laws and that it wouldn't necessarily be. The actual policy part of it isn't really that much.
it's 2 binders of, in my opinion, useless information.
Yeah, pretty much.
But I wouldn't recommend copying all those for the
No,
board members.
not the whole thing, but only those parts of it that are actual policy. There's a lot of just copies of old articles and old opinions and things such as that really wouldn't be relevant to the policy discussion.
Well, they would have 2 weeks to come in and look at it, and we'll provide them with the new copies. And if they want to look
It's all
at
part of
both.
reporting, Randy.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do.
Yes, Ernie.
I think John brought up a good point financially in that, to look at what has been spent, what the projected costs in the future, because right now, we're moving into the budgetary for 18 at this point in time. If you remember a couple of meetings ago, we were talking about the manager has got a problem in trying to look at the revenue coming in. Are we gonna have enough revenue to cover everything that we have talked about in that too? So this, this is an additional expense. I think we have to have some idea what it's gonna cost us to go. And as I said before, we might wanna take small bites rather than take the big one then. But until we get some cost figures, and with the budget being preliminary right now, all the departments are being notified where they want, and then we have to go through that end of it, and we have to look at the revenue coming in.
And the piece that we still don't have is what's the Supreme Court gonna do with the tax case, you know, going forward in 2018.
Sarah's gonna take care of that.
Yes, Randy.
My last comment for this is, I think we're kind of dancing around this issue, but I think Dave is correct. Either we go forward with this or we don't. And I don't care how we move forward from that, but you got to have either we're going forward with this or we're not. That's the basic question, either yes or no. If we go forward with it, then I agree with John and Treasurer Johnson. Then I think we can probably get a timeline, even like the ambulance, how they presented it, and how much it probably will cost. Because Susan Radwan, which does the training, she knows how you implement these things, and she can probably give us a cost and all of that. And then maybe that can be presented in the next board meeting. But the basic question, are you going to go forward with it or not?
Let's call a question.
Dave?
And that's the original, my original motion was to just adopt the principles, policy, governance, and then move forward or transition on a schedule that's presented by the manager, and he's going to take and approved by the board, and all that gets taken into consideration. Then we can transition into all of that as slowly or as quickly as we want, and certainly the expense is based on a lot of that. But I think, I agree with Randy, the first thing is to make the commitment to move forward with it.
You know,
And after that, we can set the pace ourselves.
And I'll remove from the motion, I know I added it, I will remove the amendment for the policies, because that can be a transitional item too.
So you want to read it once more? Read your original motion, just so we're all clear.
I'm not sure I can.
Make up another one then.
I would move that we.
Oh, you did it off the cuff.
I would move that we adopt the principles of policy governance, and we move forward with transition into policy governance on a schedule recommended by the manager and approved by the board.
I seconded that, and I call a question.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Yes, Ernie.
Will we have, at some point in time, come up with a financial
Yep.
picture of where this is gonna be too?
I'll have that for your next
I've
meeting.
got it down here for the next meeting. An estimate.
Thank you. See, you know, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to deliberate.
Sometimes we do it alone.
Sometimes we do. Okay. Consider authorizing signatory for MHR billing services agreements. This is for our
Ambulance billing.
ambulance. I was gonna say alleged, but it's not alleged anymore. We wrote the check.
It should be pretty straightforward. What these are the actual documents that have been talked with at the board before for MHR to do the actual billing process for us. Council Zappa has reviewed all of the documents and doesn't find an issue with them. So all that we need is authorization by somebody from the board to be the signatory so we can get those sent in.
Go ahead, Ernie.
I move to formally designate the supervisor and/or clerk as a signatory for these agreements.
So moved.
Motion and support. It's probably gotta not be, I know, I'm just
We got a legal
acknowledging you.
finger wagging here.
It's probably gotta be one or the other.
Actually, if you look at your ordinance back from 1995, and I guess I'm the one who's been here that long, it probably ought to be the treasurer.
Okay.
Your cost recovery ordinance, and this is very unusual.
I was trying to get out of it.
I appreciate that. And in 99% of what we do, it's the supervisor, the clerk, or both. But section 4 of the billing procedure and ordinance 05-0295-3, so that's from
Third version
May
of
2nd
95.
of 1995. Indicates that fire chief is to get the information to the treasurer. And to just maintain that link with your current ordinance. And I've spoken with the manager, we may want to fine tune this ordinance. The ordinance is getting a little bit obsolete in some respects, but just in the short-term interim, I think that it probably ought to be the treasurer.
I move to rescind my motion.
You can make your own motion. Go ahead, John.
I move to designate the treasurer as a signatory to MHR billing services.
I'll second it.
Motion and support. We're good then?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Nope, treasurer.
You didn't oppose that, Ernie?
Okay,
Didn't
consider
oppose that.
budget amendment 2017-06.
Present to the board Budget Amendment 2017-06. The highlight of that budget amendment is authorization is requested to reallocate expenditures in the general fund. The treasurer and assessor departments require an additional $16,000 for a wage increase for the assessor slash MCAO and associated cost, department overtime, as well as health insurance changes. The planning department will require an additional $7,000 for supplies. The offset will come from professional services. As proposed, litigation fees will be less than originally budgeted.
So moved.
No support.
Randy, what did planning have to buy?
Okay, I do want to comment or explain a little bit, because it looks like a lot of money. A couple of things are happening here. Number one, our assessor and deputy treasurer got married and now has some dependents that changed the health insurance premium. Our second assessor, which was a technician previously, is now a full certified assessor, so there was a change in her compensation that was retroactive to the date of the change, so that's why there's some retroactivity in there. And planning department acquired the $7,000 was the equipment necessary for Isaac when we hired the second planner. His computer equipment, cell phone, those types of things. So that's what that was.
Okay.
And that was calculated in the cost of that position when it was budgeted.
Question, what level is the assessor, the second assessor now?
Level 5. She moved from a 4 to a 5.
No, Janelle, he means.
Janelle.
That's Janelle. She is now a full assessor. She got her certification.
What level?
Move up instead of down.
What level of assessor?
Yeah.
Low, the beginning, the 1. Full. Yeah. She's a full. Well, let me take that back. They've changed all of the designations now. She was an MCOA. Now she is a full assessor. She was an assessing assistant previously, and they don't categorize anymore 1, 2, 3, 4. It's MCOA, which is the assessing official, which is what the deputy treasurer is now, not just assessor, but assessing official. And senior assessor, and Janelle is now an assessing official, which would be equivalent to what the former one was. And your deputy treasurer is what would be equivalent to a 3.
I thought she was a 4.
No, we don't need a 4.
Oh, okay.
By statute, we're required to have a 3 at this point, based on value.
All right. Any other questions? Roll call?
Trustee LaRue?
Yes.
Secretary is yes. Trustee Wiegand?
Yes.
Trustee Marks?
Yes.
Trustee Everson?
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson?
Yes.
And Supervisor Durant?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay. Up to the manager's report.
Really not a whole lot to add to the manager's report other than to what Trustee LaRue had already spoken to. We do have the Cats Division Community Day coming up on the 4th and the 5th. The 4th of August, the Friday, will be primarily softball tournaments, and we'll carry over, those tournaments will carry over to the early morning of Saturday, starting again, I believe, at 8 o'clock. They're starting again. At noon, we'll start the actual Community Day festivities, and at that point in time, the inflatables will be there for the kids. State Police will be there doing their identification kits. Emergency Services will have the driving simulator. We'll have our emergency vehicles. The Sheriff's Department will have their search and rescue vehicles, as well as our deputy will be there on site. Let's see, what else was there? We'll have three as of right now, 3 different food trucks that will be present, providing a fairly wide variety of offerings for the residents. Music all day long. We have several different bands. Flat Broke Blues Band. I can never say that right. The Flat Broke Blues Band will be playing from 4 until 7. A band by the name of BST will be playing from 2 to 4. And Bob Butchko will be entertaining the crowd from noon until 2. Starting at 7 o'clock, we're going to be having the last discussion. It's kind of a surprise operation, but a very strong leaning towards having a karaoke challenge. So,
Any questions for the manager?
we suspect folks will be a little bit relaxed by 7 o'clock, and karaoke may be fun.
Dave?
I just have a question of whether we are planning on having our newly purchased ambulance there with tours available.
It will be there. The big question right now is the certification by the state. It's already passed its inspections, and I'm not sure if I don't think it will be re-lettered by then. I think it's going to be going in that weekend for re-lettering. So, but we can certainly have it there.
I would just think it would be a good idea, being on we're doing a millage for that, and I'm sure everybody wants to see what we bought.
How it works.
We can have it there.
Do anything.
We can have it there, but
bells
it
and
may
whistle display.
it may not look like it's ultimately going to look, but we can have it there.
Ron's thinking 30 to 60 days by the time he gets everything.
The
back.
state certification.
Oh,
I mean,
I
and
understand.
actually,
I
and
understand.
actually to be in
Certified.
service, but
I
it.
just thought they'd like to see it.
And it
Oh,
might
yeah.
just say Township Ambulance too. It doesn't say Marquette or EMS or.
Yeah, and if any of you want to stop by, give Ron a call, Ron or Rob, and stop by the hall. It's there, or Dan, for that matter.
It's great ambulance.
It's
I mean, you did
it's
one-
in the hall right now.
One hell of a good job picking that one out. You got a good price, and it's
Oh,
nice.
yeah.
It's a nice unit.
Yeah, it's in good shape.
Yeah,
We're just fixing some of the electrical stuff on it too.
minor, very minor stuff. See what else.
John,
Yeah.
got something?
It may not be fair to ask the manager this, but there was a one-page dedicated in the Mining Journal to thank contributors for the fireworks. And I think we made a serious contribution, and I was surprised that Marquette Township wasn't included in those to be thanked.
I thought it said $1,000.
I know what we gave.
Mm-hmm.
We were not on the thank you list.
Yeah, well, as long as you're speaking with that, I'm an alumni of Northern Michigan University, and they did a very big splash about growth in Marquette, and not one word about growth in Marquette Township or any of the northern grads that have been involved in it. So I was a little disappointed in that, but what do you do?
We just keep asking.
I guess.
Tom Baldini came and asked us too.
Yeah.
Well, he's busy as a campaign manager right now. So.
Anything else for the manager? Any public comment? Anybody else want to share something?
Sarah?
All right, Sarah. Okay, that's all right.
Sarah Kimbenzi, 225 West Michigan Street, Apartment 3. As a city commissioner, it was very beneficial for me to stay and listen to your meeting and see what you're discussing. But most importantly, I think there were two things that I think will be beneficial for the city as well as the township. One is seeing what you're doing with your EMS service. I think that's something that we have always steered away from. we've been told that there really is no value in that, seeing that there is a reimbursement scale as healthcare changes. I think it's something that I am going to bring back and ask questions. I think we are dealing with how do we purchase 2 brand new fire trucks at the tune of $900,000 each, and we run those to every car accident, every fender bender, everything. And I know that we're looking for ways to bring in more revenue. I think this is an excellent idea that you're doing. The second is Heartwood, and I think there are a lot of people in the city that want to see some movement on it. I know there's people in the township that want to see some movement on it, and my hope is that we can come to some sort of agreement that we start the process. We own a lot of property in the township, and if we can start even parcel by parcel, to look at a way to kind of share, the common area, but certainly we have a lot of what we would call excess land that really is no value. We can't zone it as a city. We know you're interested in it, and I would just encourage you. I can't speak for the entire commission, only myself, but I think the residents want to see us move forward, and I think now is a good time. You've got good managers in there. You've got a city manager right now in Marquette that really wants to kind of bring us up to speed on things that should have been done over the last 7 or 8 years. So I look forward to hopefully getting to the next meeting where I know several of us from each of the boards get together. But I think this is something that we can really make some movement on, and hopefully we'll hear what you have to say coming forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Just so you know, I did give the board a little update in my supervisor's reports in the packet, but that I had talked to, oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's a fine if I ever see one.
That's my medicine call, alarm. I did talk to Mayor Campana, and apparently Manager Angeli's on vacation, and Dave had not seen the appraisal that we both authorized. The city paid the deposit, we paid the balance when it came in. It's done. It does have a per acre value to it, and I suggested to him that as soon as Mike gets back that we do something, and I told this board if you want to have another conversation at a meeting, if we want to try to get together, however we see that happening. But I know there's development on your side. Developers are getting active, want to do stuff, and have started. So the stumbling block for the public's purposes is partly you can't sell anything for less than what you pay for it. We can't buy anything for more than it's appraised, basically. We're kind of stuck. And at some point, I think it might have to be your attorney and our attorney trying to figure out how to get through your charter. What are we allowed to do? I had suggested to him that maybe we could co-own it and just pay you what we can. But there's logistics of that down in Lansing too. So I don't know. I don't know the next step, but I think we need 14 of us have to have a conversation in the managers. So just so you have that update, because I don't know if you read the packet. Any other public comment? We're good? Board member comment? Anybody else want to share anything else? No? One more motion?
Move to adjourn.
Support.
Well, I'll jump at once. All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned at 9:03.